Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for round 3 of the Rocket Mortgage Classic. Going to break down what to expect from the golf course tomorrow, as well as a look at the DFS Showdown slate and the prop side of things to give you an idea of how to attack all of your exposure. But first off, welcome on in. Hopefully you guys are having a fantastic start to your week. We're out here getting your weekend started the right way and are ready to get after it for all of moving days action. I can see we already got Zach Jeffers down there in chat. We said he's had his first ever takedown today, which first off, man, congrats on that. That is always a great feeling going out there and having a takedown, and none better than your first ever on the board. So good thing to see out there. And you played a lot of the guys we talked about, right? You had Tom, Mav, Merritt, Knapp, Fox, and Nikolai, and the only one by 0.2 points. And normally it is going to be by the slimmest of margins, but that's awesome to see, man. So first off, congrats there. Say hi down in chat if you guys haven't already, and just pop any questions that you have down there in chat. I'll get to them when we get to the DFS section. Keep your prop questions out there when we get to the prop side of things towards the end of this live stream. And let's get after it this Friday. I'm sipping on some water here. We're taking it easy before the 4th of July this next week. Going out with some family. The plans for Showdown next week might be a little bit wonky with the 4th of July. So I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to be sharing that same sentiment. So I'll be communicating with you guys about that. But yeah, next week could be a little bit of a mess. What's going on, Bart? You needed Hisatuni and Tom Kibb to make the cut for 6 of 6. Yeah, good luck, man. Doesn't always go your way, I guess. What's going on, Tom? What's going on, Phil? You lived and died by your boy Matt Wallace. Yeah, probably didn't go all that well for you, huh? What's going on, Zach? You said, yeah, thank you. Of course, dude. That's what I love to see, right? People having takedowns and stuff. That's always what we're here for. What's going on, Sam? Hopefully you're having a solid day yourself. So before we hop into all the content here, I'm going to go ahead and mention our sponsor for this live stream, which of course is our family over there at the Ship It Nation. Those guys are your source for all your needs for DFS, whether it's PGA DFS, a variety of other sports that you see on the screen here. They are your go-to provider, whether for projections, for your ownership, out there for player pool advice, DFS advice in general, on how to approach building lineups. They're your source for all of that. So they're more of an all-encompassing site that'll give you not just stuff out here for golf. They do have just a golf tier, by the way, if you're just trying to get what they have for golf over there. But they also offer stuff for basketball, football, MMA, football when that comes along, baseball, NASCAR, you guys name it. They're, like I said, a more full encompassing site covering all the different sports out there, whereas somebody like myself is more specialized on just golf and football, right? It's hard for somebody to be, a master of all trades. So I try to stick to my lane, what I'm good at out there. And the guys over there at Ship It Nation are a great source for all of those other sports. So check them out if you guys haven't already. I'm sure a lot of you down in chat are already familiar with the Ship It Nation, but they are a great partner with the channel, and use code Luke10 if you're signing up for a discount off any membership. Let's talk about the golf course from today. So golf course played a little bit easier in the morning than in the afternoon, which is what you'd expect for a course with POA greens. You heard a lot of talk from some of the ESPN Plus announcers about the fact that they were getting bumpier as the day went on, and I think that's a little bit overblown. I think that there, is a slight effect to the greens getting choppier, a little bit bumpier as the day goes on, but I don't think it was the entire reason for this advantage. Likely the firmness of the greens getting, a little bit firmer as the day goes on, likely led to the difference in scoring as well. So if I go out here, separate it by wave, you'll see, like I was showing on here before, there's about a 0.4 shot difference between the morning and the afternoon wave, which doesn't seem like all that much, but when you take a look at some of the ceiling performances, it's evident out there with some scoring. So EVR was a PM wave golfer, played him for props today. That was pretty sweet for some of my exposure. Out there on the prop side of things, ended up making a profitable morning and afternoon slate. So that was pretty sweet for us over there on the Patreon page. But a lot of your morning scores were the guys that you saw shooting -6 or better. Now, you had guys like EVR mixed in. There were other PM guys that also went out there and got to -6, -7. So that's why we didn't just play, right? The AM guys versus the PM guys. So I wasn't that surprised to see that little advantage towards the morning guys, but it wasn't like it was only that wave that went out there and was successful. So that's important to look at for round 2. And with threesomes off of both tees, it's not like weather's a huge factor to begin with. The tee times are only spread over about a 2.5-hour period. First off, with 75 players that made the cut, and also with thunderstorms in the forecast, they're sending them off of the threesomes off of holes 1 and 10 to make sure that they can get in play. Now, if they were smart about it, they'd start them at like 8 a.m. or whatnot, but they're starting them at 10 a.m. because they want to make sure that the big national TV broadcast can cover them out there in the afternoon. And the result of that is the potential for this round to bleed into Sunday, which should never have been in the cards, right? If they started this in the morning where the thunderstorm chance was relatively low, they'd have this finished by noon, maybe 1, 2. There might be a thunderstorm that comes in towards midday, which you can't see on some of these forecasts, but a lot of the local ones are calling for that chance. If that ends up delaying stuff later on, right as play is going to start, there's a chance that it bleeds into Sunday. So it's just, I think, a mistake from the tour. I want to go ahead and get ahead of that right now and just be, I guess, the first person to warn you that that's a possibility. In terms of how we go out there and play with our lineups, I don't think we can have, I don't think it's going to have a drastic impact, at least on my perspective. It's, talking about threesomes off of both tees, that small window of tee times, it's something when we have guys going off at 7 a.m., your last guy's going off at 2:33. This time around, it's the slimmest of margins for going out there and finding a weather edge. So I think if you're taking the super early starters, the guys around 10:30 in terms of start time, maybe you find a slight advantage with that. Just to show you that the guys starting early would be at 10:40 local time. It would be Silvermans, Foxes, et cetera, up here towards the top end of the board. I don't think that it's the worst idea to take a few flyers that are going off early, but like you saw today, between two defined waves, it was about a 0.4 shot advantage. With threesomes off both tees, you're looking at a 0.2 shot advantage at the very most. So I wouldn't overthink the weather. I think a lot of times when we have these threesomes off both tees, people tend to overthink it a little bit. I'm more so just playing the game theory edge, trying to go out there, really take my stands on some conviction plays with some ownership, and then use the last 3, sometimes even 4 spots in my lineup to go out there, get different, and get my leverage. So we'll talk through that. Let me bring up my DFS projections. We'll circle into that kind of talk. And now, guys, is the time to throw any questions you have about specific players. So the way that we're going to do this for DFS is, first off, I'll say hi to all of you down there in chat. And then we're going to go through some of my top plays here. And the idea of me going through these top plays is not to give you guys a player pool for tomorrow. It's more so to give you an idea of what I'm looking for in players. I will give you an idea of ownership. I'll talk through some of the higher end options in each price range. And we're not going to talk about every single player, though. So if there's anyone that you want my full take on, you want to know, whether I think they're a decent option or set up well out there for moving day, perhaps an ownership number, whatever the case may be, just let me know, because a lot of the information on here is, of course, blacked out, as I have to keep some of the information behind the paywall for my Patreon members. However, I will disclose some of the information if you just ask down there in chat. So just let me know if you guys are curious about any specific players, whether it's a take or whether it's like an ownership projection, that sort of thing. So we'll catch up on chat. We'll see what's going on down there. You've got Samuel who says you'll only be playing main slate next week. Okay. That makes sense. You might be out of state. Yeah, if you're in a state that doesn't allow DFS, that stinks. I was in Vegas, which kind of stunk during the Super Bowl a few years ago, because normally I love to be a big DFS player during that, and I couldn't partake, so that kind of stunk. And that was before I knew that you could withdraw before you reserve lineups before you get there, then just play them. I was an absolute dumbo at that stage. You're getting closer and closer to a takedown. Yeah, dude, just keep at it. As long as your process is improving, you're seeing gradual improvement in results, you should feel pretty solid about that. So, if you're getting close, that's a good sign to begin with. What's going on, Deacon? You said you're ready for some showdown and need some good fortunes. Your main lineup got killed. Yeah, let's get after it for your showdown lineups. If you're only going with one lineup on any given week, that's always going to be really tough. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about that. What's going on, Danzy? Strokes and underdogs seem high. I agree with that. Yeah, it's weather-based for sure. That's their take on it. And even their birdies are a little bit low. So not to get too far ahead of it with props, we're going to talk about those later. I like some of the overs for birdies as well. What's going on, Sites? You got a 6 of 6 in your single entry, hoping for Pendrith and Fowler to pop off. Certainly possible, especially at a birdie fest like this. What's going on, Ryan? Who are my favorite bounce back candidates? We're going to go through a few of them. So I'll let you decide between the probably handful that we'll go through here on stream. Do I think it's still a wide open tournament? Absolutely, especially with 62, 63s out there on a par 72. I'm not saying that that's going to happen over the last 2 days. I mean, probably not with the windy conditions tomorrow. But Sunday, if it's calm, we get a scoreable setup from the PGA Tour. We could see a ton of variance with the leaderboard. So, yeah, I think it's wide open. And ball in hands could be the case. You're right. Yeah, with the storms that they're going to have. I don't know. I think it's wide open yet. I don't think it's a 1-horse race or a 2-3 horse race or anything like that. Is this a 3 or 4 round tournament? It's 4 rounds this week. Was there any advantage to starting on 10 the first 2 days? There was not, Ross. I looked at that day 1 and there was nothing to it. And based on setup, there's no information to give us an idea that there would be. So yeah, nothing to that, man. All right, if you guys have any players you want my take on, just let me know, and we're going to go through some of my top options. So Cam Young has been incredibly dialed with the irons off the tee play ever since he shot 59, and frankly, the round before he shot 59 also looked really sharp out there. So the fact that he's continued that into the Rocket Mortgage is not necessarily a surprise. I'm surprised that he wasn't mega chalk this week, and frankly, it didn't make much sense to me that he wasn't the second highest owned player out there for large field GPPs. So at this stage, I think people are coming along. I've got him as the second highest owned player out there for round 3 Showdown. So he's going to be getting some ownership out there. However, I'm still going to play a few guys up top that are getting some steam. So, it's not like I like Cam Young the most. Like he's just like, oh, this godly player that I'm taking. You can afford to take a few pieces of chalk in a piece, a few lineups, right? Now, it's not like I'm taking him in every lineup. Right? I'll probably be playing him in like 45% of lineups, something around there out there in my exposure, which is not that 2x leverage that I think a lot of people shoot for in their lineups. So I'm willing to take slightly, under that out there for my leverage, especially with a player that's going to be like 33% owned. So he's the kind of guy that I like out there for lineups, but this is a personal thing. I know a lot of people out there will play guys like him out there in like 50, 60% of lineups. I just don't like to be that aggressive, especially when I'm playing like 40, 50 lineups out there in a slate. It's just something that I like to scale back a little bit with my exposure. I like to be a little bit more conservative with it, especially with the amount of lineups that I'm going with. If I only had like 4 or 5 lineups, I'd probably be totally fine with going 60% on that kind of player. Next up, you got Will Zalatoris at $9,100. Didn't have his best stuff in round 2, but round 1, I mean, you saw the potential from Willie Z. It's all about the flat stick. Round 1, made a few long putts, was consistently, about half the time making those 10 to 15 footers. And out there for round 3, that's what he's got to do. Round 2, his ball striking wasn't all that sharp, but on top of that, he wasn't getting any of those bonus putts to drop. So only went out there, got it just slightly under par. So out there for round 3, that is really all we're focusing on. And the ownership is still there. So that's the unfortunate part about some of the guys up here in the 9 and 10K range. Even if they don't have the best form, they're still going to be owned. So players like a Taylor Pendrith, for example, if you were hoping for sub 10% ownership, that is an absolute pipe dream. That is not going to happen out there for round 3 Showdown. There's no way he'll be sub 10% owned. So, you got to just know that when you're playing these guys up top. And that would include a Willie Z, a Mav McNeely. I've got it nearly 20% ownership. Even a Mark Hubbard, who's just here at -4, just made the cut. I've got it over 13% projected ownership. So the ownership up top is relatively spread out. That's not to say that we don't have some chalky pieces. Cam Young being a prime example, Akshay Bhatia being your highest owned player on the entire Showdown slate. Moving on from that range, we just talked to Willie Z. I like Ben Griffin at $8,200. He's kind of going under the radar at -6. He's in the middle of the leaderboard at this stage. Going into the week, there were quite a few people that bet him outright that thought that he had a decent chance out here at the Rocket Mortgage. And at $8,200, because he's maybe slightly overpriced compared to how he's performed over the first 2 days, he's not getting as much attention as he probably should. So if you're looking for a little bit of leverage here, I would say that Ben Griffin would be your guy, but kind of like this 9-10K range, I don't have anyone down here really that low owned. I mean, even guys like Taylor Moore, who I have as some of the lower owned options down here in the 8 or top end of the 7s, is still just under 10% when it comes to his projected ownership. So there's not that many guys you can get quote unquote cute with down here in this portion of the leaderboard. A lot of the real low owned guys, your sub 5%ers, that you're going to be able to go out there and take for leverage in GPP lineups are going to be down there in that 7 and 6K range. And I would say the middle to lower end of the 7K range and then the 6K range, because a lot of these top end of the 7K range guys are getting some attention too. We'll get a sip of water here, and then we'll talk through another player at the top end of the board I like keeping an eye on the chat here. And yeah, Rory says with Cam Young that he likes the wet course for him. I think that's another reason to play him out here for tomorrow. So definitely agree with you. Who do I think is going to win? If I had to guess, probably Cam Young with his positioning, the form. I mean, the guy shot 59 right heading into the event. It's setting up really well for him. How do I like Hostler, Pendrith, and Silverman? I like Hostler, relatively low owned. I think has upside, especially with his streaky putter. Pendrith, a little bit chalky for my liking, but is going off early. I don't want to give away whether I'm playing, all these guys that people are asking about or not, but I think that he's a solid option for some leverage. Still getting ownership though. Like I said, there's no one up top that's truly low owned. And then Silverman, I'm at a 5 out of 10 on. 5 out of 10 on. I don't really have a take there. Shipley at 7,100 based on his scoring seems a little high for somebody not battle tested. Yeah, maybe not battle tested, but also we don't know the upside. Somebody like Auberg was priced at that stage at one point, and now it's $10,000 in 10, 15 to 1 to go out there and win golf tournaments. So it all depends on the talent. And Neil Shipley to this stage has been unbelievably consistent out there with the shots gained approach. So to the stage of the golf tournament, that's really what's been carrying him. It hasn't been some super hot putter like you've seen with some of these like amateurs or some of the up and coming players. It's the ball striking, which historically is the most consistent stat on tour. The thing that you can't fake right around the PGA Tour, the thing that all the best players do, right, is shots gained approach, because they can sustain that from event to event. I don't know. I feel like with Shipley, there could be something brewing there. Now, I want to see it for the rest of this event. I think a top finish here would solidify that for me, but it's not just the two major performances. It's last week, going out there on another professional tour, top 10ing. It's the collegiate performances. It's, going head to head out there against Thor Bjornsson. It's impressive stuff, right? Ben James is a kid with 2 first names. Yeah, that's true. Pretty funny name, if you ask me. Is he worth a dart throw? I think all those guys are. These young, talented players, it's an easy golf course, are capable of going out there and scoring. Now, do I think he's the best play down low? Probably not. Frankly, I'm not taking that many guys that far down in the pricing. However, he's in play for sure. Like if you're asking if it's like without reason to go out there and take somebody like him, absolutely not. I think he's totally playable. Shipley is in that Dunlop category. Yeah, I think we have to just keep an eye on him. Yeah, like Dunlop, another great example, right? Like, dude, there are so many people that have been chirping me about my Dunlop love, saying that I think that he's like a potential like top 10 talent someday, which is like, I don't think that big of a hot take. The guy won his first ever start of the PGA Tour and has consistently looking to gotten better week after week out there. I'm not saying that he's going to do anything special this weekend. I'd hope that he can compete. That'd be great to see from him for sure. But there's some guys that are just built different. Maybe Shipley is. I think we got to see a little bit more. Dunlop, I'm already sold on. I've seen enough. The birdie or better numbers, the opportunities gain numbers, swing speed numbers are all off the charts. Now, his smash factor, the one thing I'll say about him is that he's not as efficient as he needs to be off the tee with converting that swing speed into power and into actual distance, but he'll get there someday. He has plenty of time to improve. All right, let's talk through a few other plays. So Ryan Fox at 15.5% is somebody I'll play despite, about average ownership. Now, he's not chalk for this range, but at the same time, like I said, nobody's low owned up here at the top end of the sevens. So Ryan Fox at 7,900, I think a reasonable play for this slate. It could be your third, fourth man into a lineup. So, it's an efficient price tag. I think a lot of guys here, like Ben Griffin, even 8,200. We're going to talk about Jake Knapp here in a few seconds at $7,500, who's also getting a little bit of ownership himself. The price tags I feel are very soft. And, even for main slate, I felt the price tag was very soft for Jake Knapp, even though he's been priced up from that out here in round two, from round 2 to round 3 Showdown. I think he's still a decent play out there in lineups as well. And what I like with Ryan Fox and Jake Knapp is we're going to have windy conditions, which I think will lead to slightly more bogeys. However, the birdie average, which was about 4.5 today, I don't think it's going to go down to like 3.5 per round, right? It's windy out there for sure. However, at the same time, it's not going to blow these guys off the golf course. And just like round 2, I mentioned the wind direction yesterday as being an important factor. We saw that with the scoring average, right? Scoring average got a stroke easier. That wind direction is the same out there for tomorrow, at least for the first like 2/3 of play. Last third of play, it might be slightly diagonal out there for the last, 2.5 hours of play. Either way, it's not going to be directly into like it was day 1 on all the par 5s. So having that advantage is, was at least worth a shot today, like you saw with the scoring average. I think tomorrow is still going to be like a saving grace for these players. Right? This golf course was designed for that prevailing wind. And when you get the opposite, even if it's a light wind like we had for Thursday, right? It was hardly over 7-8 miles an hour out there for Thursday. It only played 1 under par, right? It had that big of a difference out there in scoring. That's why even with the wind, for props, I like a lot of like overs on birdies or unders on strokes. So we're going to get to that later. But circling back to why I'm taking Ryan Fox and Jake Knapp, it circles in here. The par 5s are going to be all your scoring, right? If it's going to be windy and your other holes are playing into the wind, like some of your par 3s, 3 of the par 3s are playing into the wind. A couple of your longer par 4s also play into the wind. So you had a few holes that actually played over par today. The holes where you're going to go out there and make birdies tomorrow, outside of some of the shorter par 4s, are the par 5s. And you know who kills par 5s? Ryan Fox and Jake Knapp. Long bomber players like this that gain with their longer proximity buckets when it comes to their approach play. So that's why I like them despite the ownership. Fox is going off in the middle tee times where he's, -6. So, but Jake Knapp at -9, he's playing decently well so far, but he's not playing so well that he's mega chalky, right? Like somebody like a Taylor Montgomery's getting some ownership. Sam Stevens with his projection at -9. Even Dunlop, Patrick Rogers are taking away ownership from Jake Knapp, which I think is a mistake given his skill set fit here. Let me get a sip. My mouth's getting a little bit dry. Alrighty, so Luke Clanton is up next, which is a huge leverage play for me. So we've talked through some ownership, right? So I want to point out some of my bigger stands. And naturally, your bigger stands are going to be on guys that you have to take at higher exposure, which are usually higher owned players, right? Because if somebody's like 3-5%, you don't have to play him in a ton of lineups to get leverage out there. So we're pointing out some of the higher owned guys because of that. But down here at the lower end of the board, I wanted to point out some true leverage plays. And I think Luke Clanton is probably the best example of that. He was an absolute striper the last time we saw him, right? Played as an amateur in a couple major championships, and the shots gained metrics, particularly with the ball striking, were rather impressive. And to this stage, is gaining both off the tee and on approach. Now, it's not earth-shattering stuff, but that's what you like to see. He's relatively long off the tee. Iron play has been good enough to this stage. Maybe he can catch some fire out there with the flat stick. It would be a great story, of course. And I think that he's at least tour level. Like, these sort of amateur players that go out there, Monday qualify, maybe they get into the field just based on a sponsor exemption like you had with Clanton. These are the kind of guys that I think could catch lightning in a bottle, right? They catch a solid stretch of form, go out there and sustain that onto the PGA Tour. And maybe that's what we've got with Luke Clanton right here. So the shots gained metrics kind of hold up, and definitely a player that I'll mix in. I'm also taking Chris Goddard. Goddard just made the cut with a chip in out there on his last hole. I don't know whether he putted or chipped it in. I don't know if there's a video of it. I haven't seen it yet. If there is, he was just off the number 9 green, which is par 3, went out there and then made his second shot. So at $7,000, I think that gives him a lot of momentum heading into moving day, and he's got nothing to lose, right? He made the cut on the number. He's -4. He's only 5% owned. I don't think he's a sexy, flashy play that people are going to get to. However, he's got a lot of that same power and upside out there on those par 5s, which, maybe it's a hot take for me, but on windy conditions where literally all 4 of the par 5s are going to play downwind, I think that matters, right? That's something that I'm incorporating into my analysis. So that's something that I'll take with Chris Goddard up, and a player that I think just has a lot of firepower to begin with. Going with Nate Lashley at -6. He, of course, has won this event, had the hole-in-one out there with his second hole of this golf tournament, and is only 2.1% owned. So he's not a sexy name. He's not one of the superstars out here in this field. Has gone out there and won or really had a lot of top finishes lately. But he is somebody that the stats always love. I mean, no matter when you look at him, even if he's not posting like these top 20 finishes consistently, the stat model will almost always love Nate Lashley. And that's largely because he's best on approach and with the putter. And those are the two most important categories out there on the PGA Tour. So that leads to him making a lot of cuts. I think that's really where he does a lot of his damage, right? He kills you with consistency. But out here for Showdown, I think he has upside at a golf course that he's won at before, especially at only 2% ownership. And then the last play I'm going to point out is Nick Hardy at $6,600. And then Nick Hardy's really hitting the ball well on approach. So if you take a look at the approach stats over the first two rounds, he's in the top 15 of the field in the category. He's only 1.5% owned. He's just in the middle end of the board. Like I said, doesn't really stand out unless you're looking at some of the shots gained metrics. And that can get me on a player that's only $6,600. That's going to be sub 5% owned. So down low, you've got to find a reason to play guys. Maybe it's long-term birdie or better upside, right? Guys that are just known for going out there and having nuclear rounds. It could be some first-round leader guys that have done that often. Players that just in general have popped off out here with DFS points, right? Just looking at ceiling over there on some of your projection slates, whatever the case may be. So Nick Hardy, a player that checks that approach box for me, and also long-term is a pretty solid birdie maker as well. Let me see if there's any questions about any guys in particular, and if not, we'll build a lineup together, and then after that, talk through some props. So what are my thoughts on Stevens? And do I think that he's going to get some ownership? So you're thinking that he will because he's in the top 10? Yeah. So he's going to get some Deacon, but he's not going to be like 20%. So if memory serves me correctly, I've got him just under 10% projected ownership, which is higher compared to some of the lower-owned guys in that range, but he's not like mega chalky by any means. Hisatune, hitting the ball well, Bart. So yes, I think he's a decent option for tomorrow. And yeah, he's in my player pool. I'm guessing you've already seen it, right? Kep says, you made 1% of your money today. That's not great, dude. Hopefully you can do better. Was decent for me. I made about 2.5x myself. So I definitely am playing with house money at this stage. Who is the one guy that can make up for your bad loss? You know what? Just because you seem to be like kind of complaining about it a little bit too much, I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to ban you by any means. You know, you can complain all you want, but I don't know. That's just wording a question like that and expecting me to answer it is just kind of wild. So yeah, dude, I'll ignore you. Don't post anything else because it'll be ignored as well. What's going on, sites? Joe Highsmith sneaky at $6,400. I wouldn't say he's that sneaky, but he's kind of like somebody like Sam Stevens here. He's not mega chalky as well, right? He's not going to be like 20% owned, but because he's played well the first 2 days, and especially because he played well round 2, went out there, had the hole-in-one today, made all those birdies on his back nine, really moved up the leaderboard. I've got him higher owned than you'd probably like, especially for like a $6,400 golfer. So for lotteries, I don't love him just because I think he's going to have higher ownership, but I don't think he's the worst play. Thoughts on Baddeley and or Kazire? Baddeley has upside. I like him in general this week because he can make some putts. It's not an overly long golf course. I do kind of like the Bombers for tomorrow. I do have to say, especially with the par 5 emphasis. However, I don't think you have to only take Bombers, right? I never said that. So Baddeley is in play. You got to hope that he goes out there and gains like 5-6 strokes putting, which is well within his range of outcomes. Kazire, the upside with Kazire is the ceiling. Kazire is a player that'll go out there and he'll blow up quite a bit. He's a very inconsistent player. That leads to quite a few missed cuts for him when, he'll just eject one of the 2 first rounds. And even if he goes out there and posts a respectable, -1 to -3, a lot of times he'll go out there and he'll miss the weekend. So somebody like Kazire, if you're in a big lottery, if you're playing the big 20, big $5 GPP, that sort of thing, I think he makes sense as a last man in, right? Like you're not playing him in all your lineups. You're only playing him in like 1 of your 5 if you're going with that kind of exposure, but he makes sense for that. Spawn and Riley. So Spawn, I like the ball striking numbers. His approach play in particular, Petrini. So I kind of like that. Davis Riley, let me check on that. I didn't see him in a lot of the approach stuff I was looking at. So just to give you an idea on spawn, and I'm looking at approach. That's just round 2. So yeah, let's look at rounds 1 and 2 because that's what I was looking at before. Okay, so I'm on the other tab. You guys can't see this, but that's all right. So JJ Spawn is into the positive in all 4 stat categories, gaining about 0.7 strokes per round on approach. So I don't know. I'll take that out there. And then who is the other player? Davis Riley. And by the way, it was fun. I think that makes that very sustainable. So that's why I think he's a decent play out there for tomorrow. Davis Riley, on the other hand, is losing about 0.8 strokes on approach. So I would be a lot more hesitant with Davis Riley. I don't think that JJ Spawn is an all-star play by any means. However, it's a decent enough stat profile, especially because he's getting in all 4 stat categories. Highsmith trying to be the left-handed Malnati. Yeah, dude, he's got the bucket hat going. It's I like it. I don't personally end up rocking that, but I think it's a pretty solid, pretty sleek look. That's for sure. All right, let's build a lineup together so I can give you an idea of my thought process and actually going out there and getting to exposure. First off, smash the like button if you guys haven't already. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come, including our live stream out there for round 4 and Sunday's action. We're going to build a lineup together, give you an idea of my lineup building process, and then afterwards talk through all the props out there for tomorrow. So whether it's underdog, prize picks, pick 6, we're going to talk through all of that action. This will be the last bit out here for DFS. So if you're somebody that was stopping by for DFS and you have any questions, now is the time to go ahead and throw those down in the live chat. If you don't have any questions, this will be our last little bit here before hopping on to props. So like I said, smash that like button if you haven't already, especially if you're a DFS person that's popping out of here relatively soon. So let's figure this out here. So in terms of our lineup building process, let me get a sip of water before we do this. A lot of it depends on the contest that we're entering, right? So if we're entering a large field GPP, our mindset is going to be different than if we were entering a single entry contest. And that could even be like a pretty big single entry with like 1,000 other people, 500 other entries, right? Relatively large contest. It's going to differ from the big field GPP. That kind of thought process, the big single entry contest, is going to differ from your cash contest, right? And there's kind of a spectrum, right? On one end, you've got GPP mindset. On the other, you've got cash. Single entry is kind of a blend of the two. You can afford to take slightly more chalk. And in cash lineups, you want to take almost all the chalk that you can find. So on the other end of that is GPPs, where we want to get different. We want to create as much leverage as possible within reason, right? So that's why we still take some of the chalky players up top, because they're inevitable, right? The only way to avoid all the quote unquote chalk tomorrow would be to leave like $10,000 on the table. So like start in the 8K range, take like mid 7K range players that are unowned out there in your lineup, which I guess could pay off. Like it's Showdown, it's crazy. The variance is insane when it comes to your actual optimal plays. However, it would be silly, right? No one plays those kind of lineups. You're not going to have the perfect lineup to go out there and take down a GPP. So you can still take some of that chalk up top. So you still have your other spots to get different. It's why I like some of those sub 5% owned players so much. So we're going to do this for the large field GPP, which for a lot of people, and even for single entry, I think this will give you a good idea of how to build a lineup, is going to be what you're trying to do out there for tomorrow. So in terms of a first man in, if you're going with a Cam Young, who you guys know I like as a play for tomorrow, it's going to cost you quite a bit, right? 10,500. Even a Minwoo, who I think is a pretty solid play, is 10,000 himself. Going down a little bit further, McNeely 9,200. That would be a cheaper way to get things started. For the sake of this, we're going to go ahead and take Minwoo here. And for our second man in, I'm going to go ahead and throw in a Mark Hubbard at $8,300. That puts us at 7,900. So we could choose to make this really studs and duds and add in one more stud up top. We could be a little bit more conservative about it and go down to the top end of the 8K range and take that as our second man in. In that case, right, Hubbard would be our third man in terms of price. Or we could really keep this balanced and just live in the 8 and top end of the 7s. And what I'm going to choose to do here, because we're in the large field GPP, is make it more studs and duds. Because if I was in a single entry, I'd be a little bit more willing to take on ownership, right? If I was taking on more ownership, and I was just worried about being a really solid combination, not necessarily having the nuts, right? Like you need for some of the big field GPPs. Well, then we can maybe just spread out our exposure on better players. Because if you remember, there's guys in this range like EVR, Højgaard, Fox, Davis. I mean, all these guys are legit players, really good showdown players because of their birdie better upside that we could just hammer into this lineup. So if I was in a single entry, I would be real tempted to just like do something like that and maybe take. You already know somebody I like there at -10 you could use for the last minute. Like in a single entry, I hate to give that away, but there's a good chance my lineup could look something like that, right? So I don't know. I think that's a decent build for something like a single entry. However, that would be pretty chalky. Your lowest owned player in that build would be just over about 10% ownership. So you don't have any spots where you're really getting that infinite leverage to the field. And I think that's a little bit worrisome for your lottery contest. So that'd be decent for a single entry. But if you were doing that for a larger field GPP, well, let me show you how that would look. So let me go ahead and throw him in there. Who else did we take in that lineup? That's right. We took it more balanced. So we're going to start with Minwoo and then Hubbard here. But rather than going more balanced, we're going to force our hand a little bit and take Will Zalatoris. So we're going to take Willie Z at $9,100. Now we're down at $7,500. I'm going to take Eric Van Rooyen in here. I'm going to throw in Nick Dunlap at $7,600. And then for our last man in, if we took Lashley here, this lineup would be totally fine with leverage. Because we're a little bit more studs and duds up top, we forced ourselves to get to a Lashley as a last man in, who will be that sub 5% owned play. Now, in a lottery, this would kind of be pushing the envelope a little bit. We only have one true pivot in this lineup. I'd prefer to have at least two out there in my lottery builds, but even this, I think, would be borderline okay out there for your lineup. So you'd have to look at the other spots with their ownership. I mean, like Hubbard's not that chalky himself. Dunlop too, right? I've got Dunlop at sub 10%. So like you've got enough leverage here, in my opinion, but you could make it a little bit more contrarian, in my opinion. So that's an idea of how I'd be building for some of the bigger field contests. First one was more of a single entry. That's more so what I'd be looking at out there for GPPs. Let's see what we got down there in chat. Barry's on the Nick Dunlap train. You love to see it. Yeah, me too, man. You're going to Detroit for the final round, you said? Hoping for a stacked leaderboard. Yeah, hopefully Cam Young keeps it up. Akshay staying up there would be good for you. And it should be a lot of fun, man. It's a birdie fest. I'm assuming normally at birdie fest, we don't get that much separation. So hopefully it stays close here on moving day for you. Newbie question, how do fairway props work for par fives? It's on the off the tee. So if you hit it with your tee shot, you get credit for it, not on your second shot. Par threes, there is no fairway, of course, as I'm assuming you know. And then par fours is the same thing, right? It's your tee shot that counts. Of course, Samuel. Thoughts on Kirky? Love the course history. He's playing decent enough for my liking. Ownership is there, just like everyone else in that range, but I think he's a solid option for sure. All right, let's talk through some props, guys. So I don't have my stat averages up because I forgot to do so. I was entering a lot of props myself, so I forgot to do that. But I'll bring them up real quickly so that we can hop into this because on Underdog, I already have quite a bit of action in. So we don't have to delay here whatsoever. Okay, that's the right screenshot. And then let me blow it up because for some reason when I drag a picture into Google, it makes it the size of a grain of rice, which is obviously not optimal for stream purposes. So, all right, there we go. There are the round two averages, which I don't know are that applicable to round three because, like I said, there's wind. It's going to play harder than what we had for round two. However, there was a cut line and a lot of shitty players that aren't playing the weekend. So we got to balance both of those and the fact that it's still playing downwind. So round one, it only played 1 under par. I think it's going to be somewhere in between 1 and then 2 under par like we saw for today. So if I had to give you guys like a predicted scoring average, I would guess 1.5 under par, which would be about 70.5 strokes. Now that's for the field. Your players on Underdog and Prize Picks are in general better than that field average. So keep that in mind as well. Over here from birdies, that'll probably go down. Maybe it goes to like 4 per round. But I think that would probably be a worst case scenario, especially considering that the cut line was made. I think it'll be at least 4 birdies per round. Your bogey average, I think will be around 2.6 per round at worst. It wouldn't surprise me if it stayed at about 2.5 per round. So that's why I say that the scoring average is probably not going to move all that much, because after the cut line, I don't think the bogey average for the field is going to move all that much. You've had a lot of your crappy players miss the weekends, not have to worry about them in the mix anymore. So I think a lot of your crappy inflated nuclear over par rounds, like shooting like 4 or 5 over, were why this was 2.5 per round over the first 2 days. So with some wind, it's going to throw in a little bit of a wrench out here into the stat averages. But on top of that, we've got to consider the fact that they had that cut line. Just to give you an idea, but like I said, at least 4 birdies per round, probably around 2.5 bogeys or worse per round. Your fairway average likely goes down a little bit. Maybe it's like 8.8 per round. But the cut line will help that. So it wouldn't surprise me if that stayed around the same number. And then your green average, same thing, right? Like it'll be windy. However, your quality of players going up to where like maybe this is 13 per round, like maybe it even goes up compared to the round 2 average. I'm going to be interested to see what ends up happening out there for round 3. So I think in general, it's kind of a hard one to get a read on, right? It's not as straightforward as some of the other slates that we have, right? Especially when it's like a carbon copy of weather from day to day. However, I do think with some moving day pins, by the way, I have looked at the pins. We're not going to do that here on stream as it takes a little bit too much time. However, I went through them before, and in general, they look like your typical moving day spots. There's quite a few in bowls. The par 5s look scoreable for the most part, especially the back 9 ones. And I think that they know with the impending weather, they couldn't put a bunch of them like 3 from the side. In fact, if you take a look at that, there's no pins that are 3 from the side. You've got a lot of them that are 5, 8 paces. Actually, sorry, 14, which is a par 5, by the way. So the one hole that they do it on is a par 5. But a lot of your other holes are, 5, 4 paces at least out there from the side. So looks like a pretty decent moving day setup. And I think there's some decent overs for birdies here in Underdog. So you've got 3 props that I was looking at before, but I want to refresh this because these aren't props that I've actually played yet. So if you're seeing these, you're like rushing to go out there and play them yourself. I haven't actually played these 3 in particular. I was thinking about it before I was line shopping them, but let me check on the other spots, which in a few cases have already bumped. Okay, so let's see. Minwoo went to 0.9x. All right. Jake Knapp went to 4.5. So I took him for over 4 birdies. Okay, that is very annoying. Same thing with Eric Cole. He also went to 4.5 birdies. And same thing with Cam Davis. Oh, goodness. It looks like they're all bumping. Akshay took for an over at 4.5 without this multiplier. Same thing with Eric Van Ryn. I took him for an over at 4. And now he's at 4.5. Yeah, these are absolute bastards. So, okay. So this is a prop slip that I like, and one that I'm probably going to enter myself to give my Patreon members even more exposure over there later. It'd be these 3. So Will Zalatoris, just like some of the other studs that have already moved to the 0.9x multiplier, I'd like for the over, right? Obviously, a lot of other people are taking these overs on birdies, which makes sense. With the windy conditions, it might be slightly easier to go out there and make mistakes, but you're still going to be able to make your hay on those par 5s that are playing downwind. Also, some of the shorter par 4s, for example. So somebody like Will Zalatoris at 4.5, that'd be asking him to gain 1 birdie to the field, is something that he should be able to do rather regularly in this strength of field. Somebody like Taylor Pendrith has been a top 50 birdie maker of the year in this field. Has been a top 20 birdie maker. Of the guys that made the cut, he is a top 15 birdie maker of all those players. In fact, I think he's actually top 10 of all the guys that made the cut in birdie or better percentage, maybe even top 5. This is a weak field. It's worth pointing out, right? Tom Kim, Cam Young were our best players out there this week. It's not the U.S. Open. It's not nearly the Travelers that we had last week. Somebody like Pendrith at the expected field average, right? I think it's going to be at least 4 birdies per round. Makes no sense as a top 50 birdie maker on the PGA Tour. So even with that 0.9x multiplier, is something that I'd take. And then Patrick Rogers, 1.5 bogeys. I do think it's going to be about like a 2.2, 2.3 bogey average out there. So that sort of player, like Patrick Rogers, who's kind of struggled a little bit, he's been slightly better than your tour average out there at avoiding bogeys. but somebody I'll take for the over. So it's just a way to make this payout a little bit better. If you just want to take the overs on birdies, which I think are maybe better spots, again, I haven't entered this myself. Maybe you go with these two. So this will be the official stream slip, just these two. If you want to add in that other one to boost up the payout, 2.5x is, it's not great out there for the two-man combination, right? That's for sure. That's because of that 0.9x combination or multiplier, I should say. Then you can add in that Patrick Rogers prop, which gives you that anti-correlation to make up for it. All right, let's see. Does Prize Picks have a board? Looks like they do. Let's see. So they've got a bunch of 4.5s, and it looks like they kept all the elite guys like off the board. So the guys they have at 4.5, for example, which is like where you can get Will Zalatoris over here, which is just crazy. Like, look at this Pendrith, right, at 4. Are guys like Malnati, Stevens, Luke List. Like it's guys that are a step down in terms of talent level, and they're 0.5 higher without a multiplier on Prize Picks. So clearly, right, the pricing on Underdog is pretty soft. I think that's where a lot of the value is right now. Strokes-wise, it looks pretty similar across the two sites. So I would say a little bit of a head-scratcher when it comes to the pricing from Underdog. It just doesn't add up when it comes to their birdies and bogeys. So let's scroll through this a little bit more. I think, if anything, maybe there are some unders on strokes that we could take on Prize Picks, but a pretty tight board for birdies, that's for sure. Let's look at this. Let's catch up on chat too. I think I mentioned Kirk a little bit earlier, but in general, I think he's pretty solid. And I might have already answered that. If so, my bad. A little bit cooked later in the day. How are my week-long lineups? This is your worst week of the year. So I had a little bit of Tom Kim, but I played a lot of Cam Young myself, also Minwoo. So I'm in the hunt. I'm about even ROI-wise, but I have plenty of 6 of 6s and a bunch of lineups that are within the top 1,000 of the GPP that I'm playing in. So I would say that I have a decent shot. What's going on? He said, shot your guy, doing good. Oh, yeah, that's right. You're talking to Barry. I didn't realize you were talking to Barry before. I didn't see that tag at the beginning. I feel like a dweeb now, but yeah, that's how my lineups are doing. All right, what do we got for Prize Picks? So I wanted to look at this strokes board because birdie board's unplayable. You don't even have a lot of the guys that you'd hope to play. I'd say that the Kirk one's not the worst, but I believe on Underdog he's at 4. Which, yeah, look at this, right? He's at 4 at the 0.9x multiplier. So, like, if you don't love Pendrith because of the form, maybe mix in a Chris Kirk instead. But, like, these are the spots that I'd be sticking to for the most part. So, let's take Kirk out of there just because of a much better line available over there on the Underdog side. On Prize Picks, let's try and find some unders. So, 69.5 and a solid player would be a good spot. So, like, Eric Van Rooyen would fit that. Kirk at 69.5 would have been nice. A Fox, a Højgaard would fit that. I don't hate the idea of a Nap. I don't hate the idea of a Dunlop. Who else here, though? Thompson, frankly, not the worst play for an under at 69.5. Now, I haven't looked at the sports books. I would imagine that they're maybe not the best values per the sports books, but hopefully they have some odds to compare to at this stage. They didn't have anything posted before. So we do have those posted there. Let's see what Draftkings has got for us. One prop posted for Zul Damon. Great. Okay, let's see what FanDuel has. They've got round score there. I passed it up. Looks like a lot more selection over here. So let's look at FanDuel. Normally I like looking at DraftKings, but FanDuel does a pretty decent job themselves. So EVR 69.5, right? We were looking at that one before, and he's minus 125. So, it's a slight lean towards what I was looking at, but it's not like it's crazy value per the sports books. Ricky is minus 150. Cam Davis is minus 140. So just look at that. Yeah, he was bumped down to 0.5. Same thing with Ricky Fowler there. Going through some of the other odds that we can compare to. Zalatoris is at 68.5, and he is juiced towards the over, which I guess I kind of understand, but I would have him juiced under. Maybe slightly juiced under, but definitely not minus 150 over. Højgaard is minus 140, but he's at 69.5. Unfortunately, on Prize Picks, was already moved down by that 0.5. So what else can we go through? Yeah, Batia's at 68.5, and he's also juiced towards that over side. Eric Cole is even money at 69.5, but he is us. Yeah, he's actually at that same number over here on Prize Picks, I suppose. What else do we have? Not that much otherwise, it looks like. A lot of guys that are at that, it's either 69.5 for every player or 68.5 for some of your elite guys and juiced over. So it's a pretty bland board. You can see Minwoo, they do have it closer to even money at 68.5. So I guess over here on the Prize Pick side, like I guess he'd be like the best option if you wanted to take it under there. I guess, what was Cam Young? Was Cam Young, I believe he was like, yeah. Well, he's also even money. I should have pointed him out before as well. He's the other player that they have it close to even money at that 68.5. I don't hate the idea of some of these guys. Like an EVR, right? He was just slightly towards the under. So let's look at some ball striking metrics. So I know the stuff for EVR is fantastic. So let's look at that. So EVR over here, you can see gaining in all 4 stat categories. That's good enough for me. I wish the approach play was a little bit better, but round 1 was good. Round 2 was, it was good enough to go out there and make like 5 straight birdies, though. Sorry, I didn't mean to click his name there. I meant to click the scorecard. He went out there and made 5 straight birdies in the back 9. So I don't know how much we want to worry about that with EVR. So I'm okay leaving him in there. Let's look at Knapp and Dunlap. Those are the 2 that I really wanted to check on the stats with. So Knapp gaining about 2 strokes per round on approach. That is exactly what we were hoping to see. And then Dunlap, a little bit further down the board, is gaining over 2 strokes per round. So yeah, that is precisely what we're hoping to see from some of these players. Thompson's not playing as well. So if there's anyone to consider leaving out there, it would probably be him. And we're going to take this out here on Prize Pick. So I'll have to add that exposure myself here in a second out here on my main account. But we'll take those 3 together out here for the live stream. Let's see. Yeah, absolutely. Get my main lineups. Yeah, I wasn't meaning to respond to the comment to you. My bad. But yeah, I appreciate that, my man. It's it could go well. We'll see. We're in a decent spot. I never like to jinx it, right? Like I know some people will like tweet their lineup like, oh, look at this exposure, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not that guy. I used to be at one point, especially when I was new to the scene, but not so much. Let's look at this pick 6 board, which before looked pretty stingy, kind of like we saw over there on Prize Picks. So in comparison to the Underdog board, it's not nearly as soft. So I think if anything, you could potentially find some fades. But even with the windy conditions, it's not my favorite thing to go out there and do. So I don't know if there's anything here I'm going to go out there and want to play myself, but just kind of looking through the options that we have. If I had to give you guys anything here, like maybe some strokes lines. I don't know. I don't love it, to be honest, guys. This board is borderline unplayable to me. Like, if anything, Sam Stevens over, but I don't even think he's going to play horribly. Like, it's just the line. Pars, I'm never going to play. That is just pure variance. That is a very degenerate, like, type of line to have there. It's just, it's there's little to no edge, right? Out there with, an 11.5 par line. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't play pick 6, frankly. Let me refresh this. Maybe they posted more lines. This is a pretty limited selection. So yeah, still only that many birdie lines. Yeah, looks like all the same players that they had on here before. So yeah, just kind of a shitty selection. So yeah, we'll just go with those props that we took over there on Prize Picks and Underdog. But as per usual, my friends, check out my Patreon page. You want access to all of my exposure, whether it's my entire DFS player pool out there for Showdown. That is posted on my spreadsheet along with my projections over there for my DFS tier members. And then for all of my prop tier members, that's where you can get all of the exposure that I'm getting to. Today was a really good day on Prize Picks. Had a perfect sweep over there on our exposure, which was pretty sweet to go out there and do. Hopefully out there for tomorrow, we can make it a profitable day on all the different prop sites that we're entering. So it's been a profitable day overall, days 1 and 2. Let's go out there and keep that going out there for round 3. So I appreciate all of you guys out there. We'll see. Yeah. Hostler tomorrow to figure it out. Yeah. Last second question. I would say there's a good chance. He's a good putter in general, right? Normally top 50 guy in the PGA Tour when it comes to shots gained putting. So if we're assuming anyone's going to kind of figure it out, I think that he's a decent option for that. So I think that's a great take there, my man. Alrighty, guys, smash a like button if you haven't already. Subscribe so you don't miss that content out there tomorrow for our round 4 live stream. And let's go out there, kill all of our exposure for moving day. And I'll see you guys out there for the content